Welcome to the next episode in the podcast. My name is Dan Hennen. We're joined here with Sophia, Catherine, and Greg, talking about Chapter 10, Closing the Case of Greg Fernandez's book. How's everyone doing today?
Doing good.
Awesome.
Doing good.
So for those following along at home, we're on the top of page 88 on a section called Tom Lyden, basically. This is part 2. We're continuing on here. And this chapter is very good that Greg has written with some very good information in it. All we'll do is read through the rest of this chapter, and then we'll try to break it down. Continuing on, it says, quote, "This was a person that was not thinking clearly," Chief Reitzeigel told Lyden. "His mind at this point was deranged. He just was not in a normal state. He wasn't thinking rationally," end quote. This is Reitzeigel talking about allegedly David Crowley. Continuing, Tom Lyden made an interesting comment stating, David's brother left their Christmas presents on the front step to avoid a confrontation. Lyden didn't elaborate on why Dan Jr. leaving Christmas presents on the front door stoop would trigger a confrontation with his brother. Tom Lyden also made a strange comment about the rear slider being open, quote, apparently for the family dog, end quote. That doesn't make sense to me. I won't dispute the fact that Tom Lyden is an investigator, but I do wonder how much investigating he did on this case before releasing his embarrassing video report. The last time Mason Hendricks saw David, in December of 2014, David, quote, looked like he literally was eating, sleeping, and breathing on his computer. Failure was not an option for him, end quote. Yet Hendricks believed David murdered his wife and child before killing himself. Quote, and there's no denying it, end quote. That seems like failure to me. In the end, Chief Reitzeigel admitted he didn't know what caused David to murder those closest to him before committing suicide. Quote, we don't know what the trigger was. What was the breaking point, end quote. Mason Hendricks once told me, I don't think anybody's ever really going to know how it all happened. He might be right, but the reason we may never know how it all happened is because the authorities were unable to prove David guilty. Danny Mason told Tom Lyden, at the tail end of it, David was living the gray state. It almost embodied him, almost to the extent of where it would dictate a lot of his thoughts and his ideas, and his, I guess, outlook in reality, end quote. Tom Lyden finishes this up by the quote, family members on both sides declined to talk on camera. Quite frankly, they're afraid they'll be harassed by some of these conspiracy theorists out there, end quote. Well, there's a lot there, folks. Where should we start?
Again, they're saying this was a person that was not thinking clearly. His mind at that point was deranged. Wouldn't that qualify as a justification or a reason to commit these murders? But yet, didn't they state they could find no reason, nothing to point them into the direction as to why he did this?
Correct.
Yeah, so if he's deranged, that's a reason. But yet, I'm sorry. It's just so frustrating.
You trying to keep it clean, Catherine? Is that what you're saying?
I'm trying to zip this sometimes it's really hard. Because, no matter which way they turn, they're constantly going back on themselves, left and right and center. And then okay, yeah, I have to take a breather because my attitude's out of control at the moment. I'm becoming deranged, so we'll just wait.
Uh-oh, you might snap.
I'm gonna snap. I mean, there's nothing in his behavior, nothing that anybody who talked to him on a regular basis, you know, the Mikes, if I remember correctly in interviews with the Mikes, they stated Jason Allen, they never said they ever saw anything unhinged about David. So if these are people who are communicating and talking with him, how is it that Lyden and the police then state that that's what it was when they themselves said they didn't know?
Catherine, I feel like your audio is a little low.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Just wondering if you backed away from the mic so you could swing your hands around while you're talking and you don't hit the mic or something, or...
What's going on with it? I'm sorry. Is it any better, or is it still too low?
It's a little low, but it's better right there.
Okay, yeah.
That's much better.
My air conditioner's on, so I had to close my door because the sucker's like a rocket. It's so loud. But again, I'm just trying to figure out how Tom Lyden could go around and quote the chief in saying that David wasn't thinking clearly when everyone who spoke with David, the Mikes and Jason Allen, people who were in contact with him on a regular, periodically, and even close to when this event supposedly took place, everybody said that he seemed fine.
Right. Because again, they're saying David was a person who was not thinking clearly. Based on what?
Right. They have nothing to base that on at all.
He just was not in a normal state. I mean, these are just, there's so much speculation. How is David Crowley's family and Camille's family not upset by this? By what they're saying here? I don't know. I don't get it.
I keep asking that question over and over, and I'm not coming up with any kind of a solution.
Yeah, only they know for sure, but they should be right here with us. Let's see. Oh, this one is weird. Tom Lyden's comment about the rear slider being open apparently for the family dog. What? That makes no sense at all. I mean, this is a person who has not researched this case at all. You can clearly tell by statements like this. Apparently for the... Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I would like to say that just because Tom Lyden read through the report, it doesn't mean that he investigated this case. I mean, anybody could read through the report and say, oh, I'm an investigative journalist now because of what Tom Lyden just did. He didn't bother to look at the case. You know, he's saying that the slider is slightly open. Well, the dog cannot fit through 1/4 of an inch. So how is that open for the dog? You know, he's just putting more BS in his thing, in his report, and it's frustrating.
Well, Sophia, you're forgetting something. Paleo is the super dog, remember? He could eat underneath bodies and faces that are put toward the floor, and he can open and close a back slider with no problem. You know, if the dog can open it, then if you would, oh my gosh, yes, you're right. Just they didn't think through any of their comments.
And they're clearly being fed something. They're clearly being told, hey, you have to respond to this. You know, I mean, there's a few things like that. Danny Mason, when he's confronted by Ben Swan about pretty much the same thing. This rear slider was a huge thing that we got very early on, and without that, without people knowing that the rear slider was opened, was not locked, that was a big question, because obviously the rear slider can only be locked from one side. So if somebody was fleeing a crime scene, they can't lock it from that side. Now, they could go through the front door. So the rear slider being left open is a huge, huge red flag that, yes, did open the floodgates for a lot of theories. I won't call them conspiracy theories, because what the police have here, their view is a conspiracy theory. They are all conspiring to say David Crowley is guilty. That is the definition of a conspiracy theory, is what they're doing to David Crowley here. So people want to talk about David Crowley and a conspiracy theory, look at what the police say, because that is what they have. That's not what we're doing here. That was never the point of the group. It still is not the point of the group. It was never the point of this book to point fingers and say, these guys killed David Crowley. It was never the point of this book. The point of this book is to remind people, to give you all of the evidence, to show you everything that they're saying, that we're saying, that the documents say, and how none of it says David Crowley is guilty. None of it proves with facts that David Crowley is guilty. It's speculation, it's slander. They are conspiring against David Crowley. And I think this the rear slider thing was a big, big thing. That was posted, that was one of the first posts in our group, really. And I know that was a big thing that the Gray State goons, these goons, Danny Mason, all these guys, they had to backtrack on, because how do you explain that? And look at what Tom Lyden is saying. Apparently, these are legal terms. Apparently, for the family dog. It's just so stupid. It really is stupid. I mean, you got to be really dumb to really take this guy seriously.
Right,
so,
because this flies in the face of everything else they had tried to do before, because their narrative previously was there was no forced entry, no sign of forced entry. Well, you don't need forced entry if there's an open door. So, hello? Yeah, there you go.
But that's all you see throughout the police report. They keep saying it over and over and over. No forced entry, no sign of a struggle. How do you know that there was no sign of a struggle? There was pure chaos in that living room.
Sure, absolutely. That open knife could be a sign of a struggle. David Crowley's cell phone being cracked could be a sign of a struggle. I mean, there's so many different things that could be, not saying they are, but that's what signs are. They're signs of a struggle. They're saying they found nothing like that. That's totally incorrect.
Right. Blood spatter going in multiple directions in the same area on the floor is sign of a struggle.
How about missing body parts?
Yeah, that. And then Stephen, in our last podcast, even stated himself that you can have a murder without anybody taking anything from the crime scene.
Happens all the time.
Yep. And, that was something that they made sure to mention in the reports also. Nothing was missing. Okay, well, that just means that this was personal. It wasn't robbery. So, I don't understand the thinking behind it.
How would they know nothing is missing? Were they there a couple weeks ago, a couple months before this happened? How do they know anything isn't missing? If they look at David's office room and they see where the dust patterns are on his desk, and they see where there's patterns, where there's evidence that there is no dust in certain areas, how do they know somebody didn't grab something the size of a DVD drive of a external hard drive and leave that house? There are areas in that house where dust should be that it is not. I mean, they're not looking
that one
for
photo.
It. Yeah.
That one photo, it shows a void in the dust in the office.
Right.
Where all those external hard drives are, just what you had mentioned. And I think the other one was also in the bedroom around the nightstand,
Yeah.
I believe. So, I mean,
there's some area there that is not dusty.
And so, once again, anyway, okay.
And I mean, that
Carry
could tell a good timeline. It could not. We tried early on. We tried to use that dust to try to see. Well, okay, if the bodies had been there for 3 weeks, how much dust could there be in certain areas? There should be a consistency of dust in different areas, and you just don't see that. Not including all of the other things that we've talked about here too, which is speculative, but we didn't have anything at that point. We didn't really have any of the documents. All we had was just people throwing out wild theories. We're trying to put out those fires, and then at the same time, trying to leave this open door for the families so that they could also join this group. But they were the first ones targeted. They were the first ones that were, people wanted to make sure that nobody from David Crowley's family or from Kamel's family ever joins our group or really speaks in that group. So it was just like, all of this stuff would not be happening if this was just a open and shut case. The way that Tom Lyden is acting, the way that the Apple Valley Police Department at the highest levels are acting, not talking about the first responders or anything, but the way that they're acting is just like, what are you guys covering up? Why don't you guys see what we're seeing? Put the glasses on at some point and just look at this stuff. And it was like pulling teeth to get them to look at anything. Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully one day that'll change. But what's this next paragraph? David. Oh yeah. Hendricks is saying that David looked like he was literally eating, sleeping, and breathing on his computer. I mean, it's just planting those seeds. But Hendricks is also saying that David Crowley is guilty, and that's it, and I don't know, because he says here that failure, David knew that he could not fail, but isn't killing your family and yourself, isn't that failure? That seems like the biggest failure to me.
Yeah, that's perfect. You're so right. That seems like failure to me. And that is a failure. It's a failure on so many angles. And here's the thing. This is why I question how close really was Mason to David, because David was in contact with these guys from Hollywood, and his deal was going forward. I mean, he hadn't failed. He'd succeeded. There was everything going on in his life. So why would someone who has his dreams finally coming to fruition all of a sudden, I'm just going to off myself and my family because I'm a failure? Really? Mason's an idiot.
There's a lot of doublespeak from him, and this is why Hendricks does not like to be quoted, because it makes it easy to call him out on stuff like this. But this is why he will be quoted, and he will continue to be quoted, because he is lying, because he will speak in doublespeak. And that is not, there's no reason for that. It's one thing for him to say what he thinks. It's another thing for him to try to tell us what is true, and then he gets caught lying about what he is claiming is true. Of course we're going to call him out on it, because we don't know how many other people he's telling those same lies to, and that's not right. So I don't like calling people a liar without proof, and he makes it very easy to prove it with his own quotes.
Yep.
Let's see. So in the end, the chief admitted he didn't know what caused David to murder those closest to him. He says, we don't know what the trigger was. And how do you know that there was a trigger?
Yep.
what was the breaking point? How do you know there was a breaking point? How do you know David Crowley snapped? That's it. Your job is not to say, well, we don't know this, but he's still guilty. You know, that's not what their job is. It's another reason why this case needs to be reopened by investigators who are competent, who don't have anything invested in this, because the way that the chief is acting, the way that Tom Lyden is acting, the way that Mason Hendricks is acting is like they have something invested in making sure that David Crowley is guilty. We need investigators who are going to be unbiased, who are going to look at this with a fresh pair of eyes, who are not involved in this, who have no say, who don't have to worry about CYA because they did something wrong, because they didn't see a bullet hole, because they missed a bullet hole that was in a freaking carpet, because they can't account for so many different things, so they just blame that family dog. This case, this family, they deserve much better. Whether they agree with it or whether they know it or not, this family deserves much better, a thorough investigation. We keep hearing the same doublespeak. The cops did everything right, yet they suck. They're a bunch of pigs. You know, the cops did a thorough investigation, yet we've given them so many different bullet points that explain why they did not do a thorough investigation. A thorough investigation does need to be done. They're acting like it has been done. We know that it has not been done yet. But I believe that it can be done with the right person, with the right people, with the right investigators. It can be done. Now, it's up to these investigators at some point. They're going to have to do that, or else we're just going to keep doing it. Somebody has to keep doing it. So I feel so blessed to have so many good people with us here now, looking into this, the different views, different angles, different, you know, stories, whatever it is, but real people looking into this. I do believe that will help get the case reopened one day.
Yeah, and you know, and I see him using all of these pertinent words, you know, trigger, breaking, snapped, you know, deranged. These are very descriptive words that they can't individually apply to David and his behavior, but they use them in a way to where the implication is that this is who David was, but there's no proof of who David was. And since they can't prove it, let's just imply it. So they want people, and have been successful, people to infer from their implication that David was guilty because of these trigger words. But yet they have nothing to back them up. Nothing. And I guess that's just, I don't know of any of us that if they presented solid proof through good investigation that he indeed had done this, that not one of us would just sit there and go, okay, well we're just going to stick with our story no matter what. But instead, we're finding the opposite true. We are showing them multiple instances where he could not have done this. It would be impossible. But yet, they still will not backtrack. They've dug their heels in, and that is that. And now everything is going to be a conspiracy theory. And it's not right.
Frustrating. Very frustrating. So I guess Tom Lyden's article came out in 2017. For some reason, I had thought it came out in 2016, but the date on it is September 19, 2017. That sounds weird. That doesn't sound right, but okay. They say so.
The 1 year anniversary is when it came out.
I thought, yeah, the 1 year anniversary. So why? For some reason, I can't find the original. Maybe it's just backed up somewhere, but I'll definitely have to find that. So this is probably a follow-up piece to it. because I know Tom Lyden's report came out first. That can't be right. Yeah, January 11th, 2016 is when it first came out. Okay, that's what I thought. Only one sentence left here. Danny Mason told Tom Lyden at the tail end of it, David was living the gray state. It seems like Danny Mason wanted to live the gray state too, right? The only problem was David Crowley was cutting him out of the gray state that he wanted to live in. Maybe David saved his life. Danny Mason, maybe he would have snapped and went into a dark place and everything, and, you know.
Well, where Danny wanted to take it was not where David wanted to go. You know, David finally figured out this isn't what I see for my vision of gray state. Danny Mason wanted the conspiracies, wanted all of these weird connections and paranormal stuff, and David was like, no, I want to take this a whole different way. So who truly is living and being embodied by the conspiracy? It's Danny, not David.
Yep. Because the 2013 script is what Danny August Mason contributed to, and it's dark, it's got all this weird crap in it, and then you look at the newer script and that's all been removed.
Yeah, and Danny's statement right here is the typical thing, what they call in psychology as, I lost the word, where they project. He's projecting his emotions and he's putting them onto David. It's Danny who was at the tail end of it and it was embodying all of this conspiracy stuff, and that was his outlook on reality. But instead of being able to face that about himself, and we have heard him state this in his conversations with other people and interviews he had done regarding paranormal stuff. So instead of being able to admit that about himself, he then transfers that onto David to make himself look important, like he really knew David. He didn't know David. He knew nothing about him.
I see. By him almost to the extent where it would dictate a lot of his thoughts and ideas. I guess that was something that's just so crazy. I was going to play a little clip of Tom Lyden's first news report. Now that everybody can hear it, I think that would be pretty cool. Let's see. This one's pretty short here. Should start somewhere.
Neighbors had also seen guns in his garage, but didn't know if they were real or if they were props from his movie.
2933 Sam 14 for suspicion, 1055 Ramsdale Drive. Cop reporting suspicious behavior next door. Went over to the home to the right of the RP, sees dead bodies inside the house, dog inside, sees a gun in the house on the floor.
Friends and neighbors bring flowers to the door of the Apple Valley home, where a family had laid dead for weeks. All police will say is that the couple, David and Camille Crowley, and their 5-year-old daughter, died from gunshots in a murder-suicide. When police arrived Saturday afternoon, only the family dog was still alive. David was a military veteran and aspiring filmmaker, the director of this slick trailer for a movie project called Gray State. The plot line had America turning into a tyrannical police state. For 3 years, he'd been trying to sell the film concept to a Hollywood studio, and recently told friends he was on the verge of a $30 million deal.
And this is with no budget. And we've already passed a lot of local films on Facebook in popularity, and we're in hibernation.
The Gray State Project had attracted the attention of libertarian conservatives. This was Crowley speaking at a Ron Paul event 3 years ago.
No Hollywood studio will touch the Gray State Project due to its contentious nature. That is why we need your help to get this film financed and seen in theaters.
The grisly nature of the Crowley's death led to headlines on People magazine and British tabloids. And on social media, plenty of conspiracy theories too. Even a Facebook page called Justice for David Crowley. with people saying they don't buy the official story, suggesting the Crowleys were murdered by special ops because the anti-government theme of his movie.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there.
Thank you.
I mean, okay. So there is, for people who are on Facebook, yes, there is a Justice for David Crowley of Facebook page. Then there is a Justice for David Crowley and Family Facebook group. Neither of those are convinced of one thing or the other. I think that's very, very clear. This is just this is just more proof of Tom Lyden not doing his research. Any thoughts on any of this? Really, it's a government conspiracy. Okay.
It is true that there's a lot of theories, but everybody's trying to think outside the box, or, we encourage everybody to read the reports and go off the reports. And when somebody new comes in and they have an interesting theory, we immediately suggest the reports and point to exactly where they are, so that we try to avoid the stigma of everything's a conspiracy in this group stigma. Plus we want everybody to know what the reports have to say and what the crime scene shows, and it's very different than what the police and the documentary say. Okay, that sounded kind of stupid. Could you edit that, please? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, for sure. You want to take a second run at it?
No, I don't.
Why? I didn't think it sounded stupid at all.
I think it sounded
shaking
fine.
my head, yeah.
At the very end it did. Oh my gosh. I'm just having a shit day. I'm sorry.
No, because I think you were bringing out a very valid point. And the reality is that, here Tom Lyden is saying that, they'll be afraid that they'll be harassed by some of these conspiracy theorists out there. Okay, whatever. And like Sophia was saying, we have always encouraged people and have told people to read the reports. And we are getting our information and our questions from these reports. So if there's any conspiracy to be had, it's coming from the reports, not from us. We're just pointing things out that, hey, wait a second, what you guys are saying doesn't make sense. So why are you coming up with this conspiracy? They're the ones who formulated he snapped, he was triggered, all these other great, fantastic words that they cannot directly link to David. That in and of itself is a conspiracy. And when we sit there and point out things like, hey, you guys missed a bullet hole. Hey, what about the back slider being open? Hey, what about the multiple blunt force trauma on David's head that would have rendered him, useless to fight? Hey, what about Kamel's arm being under her body and her face being on the floor, but yet most of her head is gone? Hey. It's not us coming up with the theories. It's us pointing out what they have told us, but they refuse to see.
Yeah, and this just seems like this last sentence just seems like a clear message to the families. Don't go near these people. They're crazy. And it's so counterproductive. I mean, it's family members on both sides decline to talk on camera, and that's because of us.
That's the insinuation, because he doesn't say the families say they don't want to be harassed. He just says the families decline to talk, but then goes on to say, and this is his opinion, quite frankly. So he's stating an opinion, trying to make it sound like it's a quote. And this is what I'm talking about. He's very adept at using words for implication to get people to infer a certain narrative. And because, you know, we're like going, hey, nope, that makes sense, bud. Then all of a sudden, you know, we're the problem.
Greg, have you ever harassed the families?
No, and I never will.
Catherine, have you ever harassed the families?
No, and like Greg said, never ever would. It's absolutely ludicrous and rude.
I have never harassed them. I've never picked up the phone, sent an email, nothing. And I can tell you that if anybody in the group came to us and said, you know, that they were harassing the families, it would really, really not be good.
Yep.
Because we don't put up with that.
Yeah. No, we don't. No, we don't put up with violence towards anybody. Very early on in the group, somebody, Judy Prochnow made some type of comment, and somebody made a violent comment towards her. That person was, at that point, was removed from the group, period. We don't put up with any of that. I don't care if you like, you know, people, if you don't like people. If you threaten violence against any person, you are going to be removed from our group, period.
And I'm glad you have that policy. You know, I have had people who send me private emails and said, hey, you know, have you called? Maybe you should write. Maybe you should text, you know, part of David's family and stuff. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. I mean, to me, unless they came forward and said, you know, we really want our story told, that would be different. Then they're opening an invitation for someone to ask them a question. But and I'm not saying I agree with their silence. I'm saying I understand to a degree their silence. And so I think it should only behoove everybody to respect that.
Yeah, and I wish that a lot of them would come forward. I know some of them have reached out to us privately, and we've done some things publicly too. I wish that the families would be more involved in this case. I really believe that. I really believe that they could, if they wanted to. If they really want to find out what happened, they'd be right here with us. I know some of them lurk. Some of them are on the sidelines watching, listening, and I just hope they're doing it for the right reason, you know, to see, you know, you guys are in a bubble. You live in this bubble where you are told that your family members are dead, that David Crowley killed his wife, his daughter, and himself. You have to break out of that bubble and look beyond that. And you can do that in this group, quietly, silently. We're presenting all of the evidence that shows David Crowley is not guilty. That's all you need to really start with. Start with that. Listen, look at all the people that told you that David Crowley is a murderer, is a child killer, and is someone who killed himself too. Look at all the people that told you that. Look at who they are. Are they credible sources? I don't know. I don't really think so. I look at Tom Lyden, and I think many people have looked at Tom Lyden and, you know, and they go, okay, who is Tom Lyden? Let's do a little research on Tom Lyden. Who is this guy? I know both of you have done some research on this guy, and
oh yeah,
it's disturbing.
Very.
Yeah, I think that's going to have to be for another episode. But yeah, you know, before you start taking somebody at their word, you might want to do a little research on them and an authority figure at least, because this person has a lot of skeletons in their closet, and you know, when Dan was talking earlier about Tom Lyden and how he's an investigative journalist, yet he never asked any hardball questions. And I'm thinking maybe because he doesn't want to get shut out by Apple Valley PD, because if he started asking the chief during that special, the 20-minute special, some real questions, and the chief didn't have actual answers for those, how would that look on Apple Valley PD? And I think that's why there were softball questions. Maybe pre-approved questions?
That could be. Do you think that...
No, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead. Go ahead.
I just, I remember when I took journalism courses in college, and I remember in one of our courses, it's like, they said you go after the story, no matter what, no matter where it leads, you go after the story, and we had to come up with stories of our own, of stuff that was going on in the news, and we had to cite every source we found, where it came from, who came from, were they trustworthy, blah, blah. I mean, we had to dig for our information just to pass a college course. And so what should they be doing in an actual job? I don't see any of that. And this would have been, and you're right, Sophia. How would that have looked on the Apple Valley Police Department? It would not have looked favorably, but that was Tom's job as a quote-unquote investigative reporter. He's to point that out, because these questions are questions that so many people have. And if you can't get them answered by the department that's supposed to be protecting you, how are you supposed to feel safe? And if they can't make you as a community feel safe, you need a new chief. That's where these should have led. But it didn't. Instead, it was patting each other on the back and going, okay, here's a marshmallow. We won't toss you a softball. Here's a marshmallow. Sorry.
That's true, too. I mean, was it an election year or something? Because, gosh. Anyway, it's frustrating because I'm still very, very put out by his special because of the way that he embellished on certain details that were just straight up lies. And
had access to those reports, correct? He saw them, so he knew he was telling an
Yeah, it was Operation Mockingbird.
Yep.
David is guilty, and at all costs, he's guilty. So we're going to make the audience believe it. Absolutely believe it. And they use all the trigger words.
Yep.
And it's so sad. Anyway.
Why? What is it? What do they gain in the end of all this? What do they gain by accusing David Crowley of this crime? They're reaching out to the audience that has been waiting for the Gray State to become a film, to become a feature film, et cetera, et cetera. They're targeting that audience, but they're not catering to that audience and keeping an open mind. They're shoving it in the face of that audience and saying, you guys are all crazy. This guy is nuts, and if you follow him, you're crazy too. There's something wrong with you too. This target, go ahead.
Yeah, look at what they're doing to everybody these days. You don't want to take the experimental vaccine? Ooh, you're an anti-vaxxer. You're an extremist. You don't want to listen to the fact checkers on Facebook and you want to do your own research? You're an extremist. You're calling out a Democrat senator or congressman, you're an extremist. You know, it's like anybody asking questions, anybody who is standing up for themselves nowadays, you know, they're slandered into submission. Your account is deleted. You no longer can fly on airplanes. You know, this is how they ruin you, and this is how they ruined David. They slandered him into submission. He can't stand up and protect himself, fight back, or anything. He's dead. And nobody will pick up for him on that left him. I mean, his friends are slandering him. His family has packed up and gathered ranks and won't do interviews. They won't talk after the documentary. Nobody is there to speak for David or Kamel or Ronnie. And it's just sad.
Yep, amen to that.
It's sad. It's wrong. Somebody has to. So they can't be mad at us for being here. If they're not going to do it, somebody has to.
But they are mad at us for asking questions. Yeah. No, I'm so serious. They are. They don't want us talking. And, you know, you have to ask yourself, why is that? Why aren't we allowed to ask questions? They made a documentary. Are we just supposed to just watch it and take it at verbatim? I mean, I don't understand. Why can't we ask questions?
Well, yeah, and that's it. We can, and we are, and no matter what they say, we will continue.
Sure. Okay. And hopefully one day they'll see that that's what we are doing. I think that a lot of family, a lot of friends think that we're just here saying that the government killed David, or, you know, we have this theory and that's it. This is what happened. Boom, done. And that's never been the purpose of the group. Obviously, everybody's going to come to their own conclusion about what they think really happened. That's just human nature. But I think a lot of the family have a false interpretation of what the group is, what the group really does. And it only takes, you know, one or two people to get into their head and say, hey, this group is saying, you know, David's brother did it, or this person did it, you know, and they're not really looking at, you know, why people are even going there. They're going there. They're going to all of these different theories because the theory that the police gave us is not true. So of course we have to look and we have to talk about all of these other theories, about all these other things that may have happened. That's how we're going to get to the truth. We're not going to get to the truth by shutting down everybody who thinks that David Crowley is not guilty. You know, it's just a weird way of thinking. I don't really get it. It just seems like a lot of people have their own motives for making sure, you know, that people think David Crowley is guilty. I really hope people are not getting paid in order to think that, in order to spread that. Yeah. David Crowley was building from a tumbleweed, and that tumbleweed was growing, and it was getting really big. You know, everything was picking up for him. All of this was going to make people think twice about trusting your government, and to realize that we are the government, not just a certain group, a small little group of people that want to control everything, but that the people are the ones that will ultimately have the final say, and we have freedoms here. And it's not, David Crowley's script was not about a conspiracy theory. it really is about our constitutional God-given rights. It is about what this country is, and where do you stand with where this country is in this ever-changing world here, in this digital age, really. You know, I mean, that, if you really want to boil it down to something, that's really what this really is. And there were a lot of false groups, a lot of fake groups, a lot of things that were created, that were taken over, that are gatekeeper groups, to keep you in these little bubbles. And I really think what David Crowley was doing, if you look at his scripts, you look at the stuff he's doing, was just trying to break you out of that bubble, for better or for worse. It was to break you out of this bubble and to look beyond those safe boundaries that we all kind of think that we have, or at some point that we thought that we did have, and to recognize that, you know what, you could be the greatest constitutionalist, and at any point a power could come in and kind of take away your constitutional rights, put you in FEMA camps, put you in these places, label you as a terrorist, falsely accuse you of something, which is exactly what happened to David Crowley. So maybe he was living the gray state, but it wasn't because he wanted to, it was because other people put him there, put him in there. And now they've pretty much created this thing where they've made David Crowley the villain of his own story here. And we're pretty much here to say that is just not true. You can act like he is, but that's where it's all gray. Everything is all gray here because you can't prove it. You know, a lot of the stuff that we talk about is in black and white, and they want to keep it gray. They want to keep it in this gray state of lies. And we're trying to say, hey, look, the documents are pretty black and white. They pretty much show you everything that you would need to prove David Crowley is guilty or that he's not. It's all there. So it's just up to people to kind of take a deeper dive into that. And I do hope people do. Any final words here before we shut this episode down?
Nope, not for me. I think you summed it up very well.
Yeah, I have to agree. You summed it up very, very well.
All right, well, next month we are going to get into something that is going to touch all of us, because this is the 21 questions for Detective Gummert. Now, Catherine, I know that you have had some questions for Gummert too, so maybe we'll try to add some of those in there to this chapter. I don't know if we'll be able to get through this in one show or not, but Catherine, just as a teaser, just kind of give us a little bit, anything about Detective Gummert, because you spoke with him on the phone. I didn't. I just sent him 21 questions. He sent those 21 questions back, but you actually spoke with him.
Yes, yes, I did, and I did record that conversation. And again, I clarify this so everybody knows, I did not let him know I was recording, because I live in a state where in Colorado, you don't need both people's permission. One side of the conversation only needs to know the recording was taking place. I did, so I recorded it. Mainly the reason why I record things, and I basically record everybody I talk to, but as you know, I don't release it. But I released this because it was important, because of what he said about the case. But it turns out that Detective Gummert called me because the chief was quote-unquote too busy, and they had pretty much already decided the case anyway, and since Gummert was the one who was handling the case, he said he would be the one who would have to talk to me anyway. So, and then we went on to talk about, a lot of the stuff and the information I sent him. I will say there was something that he stated that I felt actually pretty happy about, was when he said that of the information I sent them showing the blunt force trauma and all of the other inconsistencies, he did say that they did scan it and put it in with their stuff. So to me, that was good. That showed me that they aren't completely shut off, from everything coming in, but at the same time, they're not willing to budge.
Awesome. All right, I think that's a great place to stop this episode. And I want to thank everybody for joining us here for episode number 21.
All right, well, I hope everyone enjoyed that last piece about Tom Lyden. We have now come to the end of the closing the case chapter of my book, The Gray Stage by Greg Fernandez Jr. And it's about 200 pages. I think a very simple, nice, easy read, and plenty of sources here at the bottom that you can see there. So we got tons of sources just waiting, about 10 or so pages of sources. So, and everything that is sourced you can find, just about everything that is sourced you can find directly at my website, thegraystage.wordpress.com, so you can download that book right now. And I want to thank everybody who has taken the time to listen to this podcast, who has watched the video versions, and is a part of the Justice for David Crowley and Family Facebook group, and anyone who just really cares about getting justice. That is the main thing here, so we're keeping the case going on. And boy, I mean, this, if you think about it, the closing the case chapter was 6 pages, a little over 6 pages, and we did, 4 shows on it? So you can see, we're about halfway, not even halfway there, getting to about halfway done going through this book. And I want to thank Dan Hennen and Stephanie and Sophia and Catherine and William and Stephen and everybody who has participated not only in the podcast shows but in the bonus shows and the extra shows that we do as well on my YouTube channel, The Gray Stage, and on the other channels that we have out there too, floating around, some backup channels out there as well. Of course, there is a fake YouTube channel, The Gray Stage, and has my photo. They use my photo for some reason, but that is not me. That is a fake one. You can tell. You can look at my subscribers, or you can look at my views and my videos, and you can see there is a big difference. Plus the content, but that's something that only a loser would do. So we're not going to focus on the losers. We're going to focus on us, because we're winners here, okay? Now, if there are any winners in this case, and in a tragedy like this, it's hard to say, oh, there's winners and there's losers, right? But keeping the case alive is a win. Reminding people that David Crowley is not guilty is a win. So all of you out there that are doing that, you're winners. That's pretty easy. It's pretty simple. Straight cut. It is, the focus always needs to be on the case. Don't let people distract you away from the case. Okay? You never know. There could be people that are getting paid to just do that, to just troll YouTube channels and troll Facebook and troll. Well, you block the trolls, block the hate. Very simple. So, but you can get this book right now. You can download this for free on my website, thegraystage.wordpress.com. You can always purchase a copy. Now that the COVID thing, the restrictions, hopefully some of the restrictions are going to be lifting up. Trade shows may be opening back up. Conventions are starting to open back up across the whole country. So maybe I'll be able to do some of that and do a little traveling here. I'm hoping to do a little traveling, a little more traveling. And you never know. You never know what may come up. Lots of great projects coming up. Still waiting for questions from the Apple Valley. Patiently, we're just waiting here. Whenever you have time to get to us. We know you're so busy with all this stuff, but some of the things we've been asking for, we're patiently waiting for them. So, and we will keep patiently waiting for them. But we did finally make it through the closing the case chapter. And you may be watching this on Rumble first. This is, I am going to try to put more content onto the Rumble channel as well, which is The Gray Stage on Rumble. And so you may be watching that here. So you're watching it first before anybody else sees it. But this will be at the end of the podcast, the audio and video version. So lots of great content on that podcast. Wherever you listen to podcasts, I can almost guarantee you will find it. The Gray Stage. If you just put that in wherever you listen to your podcast, I'm sure it'll pop right up and you'll see it. So, like I said, 6 pages, we got through this, and we're past Tom Lyden. So no more Tom Lyden as far as I know, for a long time, hopefully, but we're basically over the Tom Lyden stuff. But just kind of going over, I'm just going to look at the table of contents from my book to kind of give you an idea of everything that we have covered yet. So if you missed any of our podcasts, if you're new to this case, which I'm finding a lot of people are new to this case, we have covered a lot of stuff right here that I'm going to show you, and you can see exactly what else we have to cover. So there's still a lot more to come. But we have covered chapter 1, finding the bodies, which goes over based on the police documents, when the bodies were found, what the neighbors saw, etc., etc. Chapter 2 is the first responders. That's when the police go into the house. So we did a couple shows on that too. And the suspicious deaths, how these were labeled as quote-unquote suspicious deaths. And so that is chapter number 3. Chapter 4 is examining the bodies, which you can obviously guess what that means. That is the coroners and all of that stuff. The autopsy reports, which a lot of that is still Greek to me, but wanted to put as much of that into the book so everybody can just kind of focus on their research and focus on whatever they want to look into, because I know some people may specialize in certain fields, in certain areas. They want to focus on certain areas, so I try to break up the chapters for everybody to make it easy for your research, so you can just focus on these things. And then of course you can actually go and read the documents, look at the documents for yourself too. Let's see, chapter 5 is the living room. That's a big one. I think we did like a few shows on that, right? Because there's so much to cover in that living room. So chapter 5 focused on that living room. That is one of the bigger chapters, looking at this now. Let's see, then chapter 6 is the kitchen. So that's a short one, about 4 pages, 3-4 pages. And that just goes over obviously everything that is in the kitchen here. And remember, the disclaimer here is kind of, this is before we got a lot of the recent documents, a day 1 journal, which you've seen here on my Rumble channel, before we got David's digital data about his internet search history. So before we got that, so there is a lot of stuff that obviously if I had it then, this book may be a little bit longer, but we have all that data and we're definitely going to end up doing something with it, I can guarantee you. So chapter 7 is the office bedroom. That one ended up being a little bit longer than I thought that it was going to be. So everything, it just covers everything based on the police documents, the Apple Valley Police, the BCA documents, what is in their documents that go over the office bedroom. That's kind of the flow. If you read the first chapter, you'll kind of get the flow of what I was trying to basically do with this is take all these documents, take all this stuff, take all the facts that we know about the case, the quotes and everything, and condense them into one small book. Like I said, 200 pages. Realistically, it's less than 200 pages, really, when you get down to it. But I do hope, I wanted to make it a very easy read, leave a lot of my personal views and everything out of it until the very end, the final chapter. So let's see, then we have the master bedroom. Master bedroom is like 2 pages. That's a very short one, obviously, not too much there. The biggest one there would be the Chris Peck weed issue. So we were able to get 1 show out of that, thankfully, just 1 show. Then chapter 9 is suspicious activity. Now that one, I think we did about 3 or 4 shows on that one or something, because there was a lot to cover there, and that was only 10 pages, but a lot of data about the suspicious activity that covers the item 57 and police going back into the house, etc., etc. So covers all of that stuff, and it gets a little wild, I think. And there was some things that were left out that may be put back in. Some unverified things, so we'll keep you posted on that. And then of course we did the closing the case, and if you count it, we really did 4 shows on the closing the case chapter. So we still have the next one. Chapter 11 is questions for Detective Gummert, so that's what you will hear coming up on December 1st, and most likely maybe even through January 1st. We'll see how far we get, because that is a big one. I don't know how far we're going to get with that one, but we'll see how many shows we'll be able to get out of that. Then we have a short one, which is, it's not really short, it's about 10 pages itself here too. Sister of Kamel. So that talks about Kamel's sister, some of my conversations with Kamel's sister, and so you'll get to kind of hear some of that. The paranormal experience is in there as well. If you're on YouTube, and if you have been following or listening, watching Southern Truth 79 this Sunday, which will be October 31st, 2021, I will be on the show. I think Catherine will also be on there. Sophia may be on there too. And we're going to cover the paranormal aspects of this case. And so just a little bit of that was mentioned here in the Sister of Kamel chapter. And we're going to cover it in a much broader form. If you go to my website, I do have a post about the paranormal stuff, so we'll be covering everything that's in that. In the Day One Journal, there was some other stuff that we needed to add into it, so that will also be merged in. So we'll try to pretty much cover everything related to the paranormal aspect of this case, as we know so far that is mentioned. Chapter 13 is the father of Kamel. That one is really short, and that's basically Dan Hennen's conversation with Kamel's dad. Chapter 14 is one of the most nightmarish chapter. I mean, just when you thought we were over all the drama with the Tom Lyden, I try to keep much of the drama, the hearsay, the gossip, all the distractions, and Tom Lyden is pretty much that. But his contribution was necessary. It was relevant because, he was pretty much the first person to talk about, to interview, maybe the only person to really interview the Apple Valley Police. There's like 4 or 5 of them there. The chief, he also interviewed him, and he did that way before Eric Nelson's film came out, as you know, if you've seen this episode here. So I felt like, even though a lot of Tom Lyden stuff is all propaganda and slander, I felt like it did need to be put in there as well. And a lot of lies that were told about us in there too. So we put that in there, but just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, then we get to chapter 14, which is the rotten reviews. Now this is specifically related to the reviews from Eric Nelson's film, A Gray State. And a lot of this is based on a YouTube show that Dan Hennen and I did before we had even seen it. So before we had even seen the documentary, because it wasn't out yet, right? Only certain people got to see it. If you were able to go to these film festivals, 2 film festivals, whatever, then you could see it. Or if you were part of the Gray State Goon Squad or some of their loser friends, maybe you were able to see it too early. But we pretty much knew what it was going to be, so you can watch that video and you can see how right we pretty much were about what they were going to do with that film, what they were not going to talk about, and we're right always. So the rotten reviews, that's about 10 pages, and so it's all of these guys, 5 or 6 guys who actually reviewed Eric Nelson's film, and it's some funny stuff, but only funny because how pathetic these reviews are. And like Dan Hennen mentioned, this looks like it's almost like a copy and paste job, and you start counting how many times do they mention these keywords: alt-right, conspiracy theorists, Alex Jones, Donald Trump, all this stuff, just trying to tie David Crowley to all these things that really have nothing to do with him. And then chapter 15, a quick trip to Hollywood. So that kind of covers David's trip, and I wish I would have had a lot of the journal stuff, because I feel like I could expand. That's one of the chapters that I could expand now. And we have a lot more with the Day One Journal. I mean, there's so much in the Day One Journal just about his Hollywood trip. I could put all of that in here, so we'll see what's going to happen. But that's a big chapter. But the biggest chapter is chapter 16. That is the Gray Shame. That is based on the first article that I wrote about this case. And basically trying to cover all of David's social media from 2013 to 2014, and so obviously a lot of the journal stuff would fit in well there too. That would make that chapter a bigger chapter, a much bigger chapter than it are. It's like 50 pages. So imagine if I were to put all the day one journal stuff in there. Imagine if or when I do. We'll see what happens with that. But then the final chapter is The Gray Stage, which is a chapter that I wrote. It's 3-4 pages, and it pretty much explains my view on this case, all of other questions, and kind of the long version of what you'll find on the back of the book here. So if you've ever just looked at the back of the book, I'm going to be adding this to my website too. I was like, why isn't this on my website? I need to add this here, because these are just simple questions that prove David Crowley is innocent. And then all the sources and everything. So God bless you all. Thank you again for listening, for watching, and I look forward to December 1st. We are going to continue on. Now we're moving on to Detective Gomer, so we're going to go there. We'll see how many shows we have to do to kind of break this down, because we do want to keep each podcast to about 1 hour. I think we've been doing really good lately, keeping them under an hour in some cases, without things like this, with this extra little bit towards the end here too. So God bless you all. Look forward to chatting with you very soon.